My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 28 years old, and 3 days ago I did the stupidest thing you can do in 2025. I plugged an anonymous USB drive into a computer in a building that already had a rule on the wall saying never to do that. I work nights at a logistics depot on the edge of town, a flat concrete box called lattice forwarding that supports a federal partner, which is the kind of phrase that makes you sign NDAs before they even tell you where the bathroom is. My shift starts at 6 in the evening and ends whenever the sun thinks about coming up. It's just me most nights, in my black hoodie with the faded logo, dark jeans and steel-toe boots, walking between rows of gray crates, and then sitting in a small climate-controlled office babysitting a server rack and a bank of security monitors. Above the time clock there's a laminated sheet of rules, 3 lines. 1. No personal phones on the warehouse floor. 2. No unauthorized media devices in any company system. 3. If you receive a federal emergency alert while on site, do not leave the building until cleared by a supervisor. The first 2 are common sense. The third felt like overkill, something written after too many drills. My supervisor just pointed at it and said, "Policy comes from upstairs. Don't argue with upstairs." The night I found the USB started like any other. I scanned pallets, signed off 2 late trucks, fixed a jammed label printer, and by midnight I was on break, standing just inside the chain-link fence by the front gate, sucking down a cigarette and scrolling old emails on my cracked phone. The industrial strip outside the depot is dead at night. 1 narrow road, a ditch, a strip of gravel, and a tree line. No sidewalks, no houses, just darkness and the distant rumble of the highway. I was flicking ash into the gravel when something small and black caught my eye a few yards down the road, right on the edge where the shoulder meets the gutter. At first I thought it was a rock or a bottle cap, but the shape was too straight, too sharp. Rectangular. I listened for an engine. Nothing. No headlights in either direction. Curiosity won. I unlatched the gate, stepped out into the cold, and walked along the shoulder until I was standing over it. USB drive. Generic. Black casing, scratched metal plug, no brand, no label. There was a faint dark smear along one side that could have been grease or dry blood. I told myself it was nothing and picked it up. It was colder than it should have been for something sitting on asphalt. I turned it over in my hand. No serial number, no markings, just anonymous plastic and that one ugly smear. I dropped it into the pocket of my hoodie, intending to maybe check it later on an offline machine, and that's when my phone screamed. Not a notification ping, the 3-tone blare of the emergency alert system, loud enough to make my fingers go numb. The screen turned red and filled with text. Emergency alert. A civil authority has issued an unknown risk warning for your area. Do not handle unverified electronic media devices. Report suspicious items to local authorities. Do not attempt to access unregistered data carriers. I stood there in the road with my heart climbing into my throat and read it twice. Unverified electronic media. Unregistered data carriers. My hand tightened around the USB in my pocket until the plastic creaked. I looked up and down the road again, expecting to see black SUVs or a drone buzzing overhead. Nothing. Just the same dark stretch of asphalt and the orange cone of light around the nearest street lamp. The phone buzzed a second time. A follow-up alert stacked underneath the first. If you have recently acquired a portable storage device, do not connect IT to any system. Do not destroy it. Do not discard it. Await further instructions. For a few seconds I just stood there, breathing steam, hearing my pulse in my ears, thumb hovering over the screen like there'd be some button to make this not about me. Rule 3 from the time clock sign flashed through my mind, and suddenly standing in the open didn't feel smart. I went back through the fence, shut it behind me, and locked my phone away in the little metal cubby like I was supposed to. I kept the USB in my pocket. Maybe that was the real line I crossed. The warehouse felt different when I stepped back inside. Same humming lights, same rows of crates, Same distant rumble of refrigerated units, but the silence had weight to it, like the building was listening. Dean, the only other night guy, was out sick, so there was nobody to tell me this was a bad idea. I did a quick walk of the floor just to move, then ducked back into the office. The security monitors showed the usual grid: loading docks, main aisle, front gate, the strip of road outside the fence. I glanced at the exterior camera out of habit. The patch of gravel where I'd picked up the drive was empty. No little black rectangle, no footprints, just faint fog curling across the frame in slow, unnatural-looking trails. I told myself the camera resolution was garbage and sat down at the desk. The computer's login prompt blinked steadily. The USB felt heavier than it had any right to in my pocket. The emergency alert text replayed in my head: "Do not connect, do not destroy, do not discard, await instructions." I thought about calling the emergency number posted next to the phone, the one with the federal logo, but I could already hear how that would go. "Hi, I'm nobody. I found a thumb drive and your scary alert popped up." Best case, paperwork and a lecture. Worst case, they decide the easiest way to close the file is to make sure I stop asking questions. So instead I did the thing every line of all caps text told me not to do. I pulled the drive out, slid it into the front USB port of the office machine, felt the tiny click as it seated, and watched the screen to see what kind of trouble I'd just invited in. The cursor froze, the monitor flickered, and a new window opened by itself with a single file inside. The name made my skin crawl: Tomorrow 23/47/16. MP4, and the timestamp matched tomorrow night at 23:47 exactly. For a full minute, maybe more, I just stared at the file name, trying to convince myself it was some kind of prank or corrupted metadata. Anything except what it obviously was. A time-stamped video from the future. Sitting on a drive the emergency alert system had practically screamed for me not to touch. The office felt colder than it had any right to be, the hum of the server rack flattening into a low, vibrating pressure against my ribs. I hovered the mouse over the file and pulled my hand back like it was hot. Every instinct said don't. Every line of policy said don't. But curiosity has teeth, and eventually it chewed through whatever sense I had left. I double-clicked the file. The video didn't open in the normal media player. The screen went black for 5 seconds, then a countdown appeared in white text. SYNCING biometrics. 3, 2, 1. A distorted popping sound came through the speakers, like audio tearing itself open, and the footage blinked into existence. It was grainy, dark, and shaking like it had been recorded by hand, but I recognized the location immediately: the depot warehouse. My depot. The shot faced down the main aisle, shelves towering on both sides. And then someone stepped into frame. Me. Same hoodie, same boots, same walk. He looked exhausted, shoulders slumped, breath visible in faint white puffs even though the warehouse wasn't cold enough for that. Future me turned down aisle 7, and the camera followed, though shakier now, like whoever was filming was struggling to keep up. That's when I noticed something wrong with the lighting. The overhead fluorescents were flickering in a weird pattern, not random, pulsing, like breathing. Future me reached the far end of the aisle and stopped. He pulled out his phone. I couldn't see the screen from the footage angle, but I recognized the posture. He'd just gotten a notification. And then the warehouse speakers crackled in the footage. Not in real life, only in the video. A voice came through them. A man's voice. "Calm, too calm. Marcus Webb, do not move. Remain where you are. Retrieval is in progress." My hand clenched so hard around the edge of the desk that my knuckles popped. Future me looked up at the speakers like he didn't understand what he was hearing. Then something crawled out from between the crates behind him. At first it looked like a shadow, like someone had cut a person-shaped silhouette out of the air and dragged it forward. But then it thickened, gained shape, depth. A torso, arms, legs, a head. Except the proportions were all wrong: limbs too long, shoulders too narrow, head tilted too far to one side like a broken doll. And the face, God, the face, wasn't a face at all. It was a wavering smear, like a low-resolution texture trying to load on a dying graphics card. The creature leaned forward, its neck stretching in a smooth, unnatural glide. Future me backed away slowly, mouth open like he wanted to scream but couldn't. The overhead lights dimmed until only the pulsing emergency strips remained, staining everything a sickly red. The thing stepped closer. Its movements didn't match the camera's frame rate, like it was out of sync with the world. Then the warehouse PA spoke again. "Remain still, Marcus. It cannot calibrate if you move." Future me bolted. He sprinted toward the main aisle, knocking boxes over, slipping, catching himself, running until the camera angle shook so violently I thought the footage had corrupted. The shadow thing jerked after him with movements like a stuttering animation, appearing halfway across the screen in a single skipped frame. The lights flickered in panicked bursts. The sound warped, like air being crushed. Future me crashed into a metal shelf near the loading bay, collapsed, and scrambled backward on hands and heels. The creature stepped into the emergency light fully now, and for the first time I saw its eyes, thousands of them, layered like reflections in a broken mirror, all facing outward and inward at the same time. A second figure approached frame from the left, a man in an unmarked dark uniform, someone official, someone who didn't look surprised at all. He knelt beside the creature, placed one hand on its shoulder and said, perfectly audible, "This one is stable, tag him, collapse the duplicate." The creature turned its shifting face toward future me and lunged. The footage cut to black. My pulse hammered hard enough to blur my vision. The screen stayed dark for several seconds, then new text appeared, end of stream. Archive ref, project lattice subject, M-web status, pending what? Retrieval, elimination, replacement. I backed the chair away from the desk until it hit the wall. My breath felt trapped in my throat. The timestamp on the file wasn't random. It matched tomorrow at 11:47 p.m. Exactly when I usually do my final walkthrough of the warehouse. I replayed the audio in my head. "Retrieval is in progress. It cannot calibrate if you move. Collapse the duplicate." Duplicate. There couldn't be two of me. But the more terrifying implication was that there already were. Something shuffled on one of the security monitors. I snapped my head toward the wall of screens. Camera 14B, the one facing aisle 7, flickered. Static crawled over the frame like frost. Then a shape drifted into view. Not a person, not quite. A tall, dark outline, head tilted, watching, the same aisle from the footage, the same place. My whole body went rigid. Whatever I had seen in the video wasn't tomorrow's problem. It was already in the building. And worse, the emergency alert on my phone hadn't warned me to stay away from the drive. It had warned me because they knew I had it. Knew I'd eventually watch the footage. Knew that by watching it I'd triggered something. On the monitor, the figure turned its head toward the camera lens. Slowly, deliberately, like it knew I was watching. The speakers in the office crackled just once, like someone testing a connection. Then a man's voice, steady, calm, the same one from the footage, said, "Marcus Webb, remain where you are. Retrieval begins tonight." The voice coming through the speakers wasn't loud, but it hit me with the force of a gunshot, calm, controlled, absolute in a way that made my bones vibrate. Retrieval begins tonight. Not tomorrow, not according to the timestamp. Tonight. Whatever timeline the footage had shown me wasn't something set in stone. It was a warning, or maybe a schedule that had already shifted the moment I plugged that USB in. My first instinct was to run, but every exit door in the warehouse required a keycard accompanied by a manual override that logged the time and user. And the voice had come through the building's internal system, meaning someone else, some agency or something pretending to be one, had full access. If I tried to force an exit, they would know instantly. Camera 14B flickered again. The shadow figure in aisle 7 moved closer to the lens without actually walking, as if each frame showed it slightly nearer, reality adjusting itself around its presence. Its head twitched in tiny stutters, syncing and desensing with the camera as if the world was buffering around it. I pushed myself upright, heart slamming so hard I felt it in my gums, and backed toward the far wall where the emergency kit hung. Inside was a flashlight, a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher, and, most importantly, a compact metal pry bar. I yanked the kit open, grabbed the pry bar, and held it in a white-knuckled grip even though I had no idea if something like that could even touch whatever I saw on the feed. I turned back to the monitors just as the figure shifted its head directly toward the camera. Despite the distortion smearing its features, I could feel it focusing on me. The warehouse PA popped again, this time with a short burst of static that carried a faint whisper under it, a breathy syllable that sounded almost like my name stretched across multiple voices. I froze. It wasn't the calm official voice this time. This was something else, something hungry. I forced myself to move, creeping to the office door and locking it even though a lock felt about as useful as taping a chair to a tornado. I killed the overhead lights, plunging the room into a dim blue glow from the monitors. If anything came through that door, at least I'd see it first. Then the monitor grid changed. Not all at once, piecemeal, switching cameras in a cascade that made the office pulse with light. A menu I'd never seen before flashed across the center screen. Project Lattice Internal Access, Authentication Failover, showing subject files. Below that, 6 video thumbnails appeared, all labeled with my name. WebM001, MP4 WebM002, MP4 WebM003, MP4, and so on. Footage I never recorded. Footage I never lived. I clicked the first one. It showed me walking down a highway shoulder during daylight, wearing clothes I didn't own. Cars passed me like I wasn't there, or like I didn't belong. The second showed me sitting on a bus, staring directly at the camera for 30 uninterrupted seconds without blinking once. The third showed me in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, eyes open, not breathing. The fourth was filmed in what looked like a morgue. I was lying on a metal slab, chest stitched open. My face was gray, slack. A gloved hand moved my right arm, rotating it gently like testing a mannequin's joint flexibility. But the fifth file was the worst. It wasn't video. It was a still frame. A photo, time-stamped 2 hours in the future. And it showed me lying on the warehouse floor, eyes open, staring at the camera, a smear of dark blood trailing from my nose. I slammed the window closed so hard the mouse nearly fell out of my hand. The PA crackled again, more static than speech, and the calm voice returned. Marcus Webb, remain in your current location. Retrieval unit dispatched. On one of the exterior cameras, a black SUV rolled into view, unmarked, silent, headlights off. It stopped just outside the chain-link fence. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He wore the same dark uniform from the footage. He looked straight up at the camera, lifted a hand, and tapped an earpiece like he was listening to someone. The warehouse lights flickered. Something on the roof groaned, like structural supports bending under sudden weight. The shadows in aisle 7 lengthened unnaturally, stretching toward the office as if pulled by invisible strings. I realized staying put wasn't an option. If I stayed, retrieval meant exactly what I saw in that morgue video. Collapse the duplicate. Which one did they think the duplicate was? Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they wanted both. The monitors switched again, automatically, to a top-down view of the entire facility. A small blinking red dot labeled subject. M. Webb pulsed over the office room. They weren't tracking me visually. They were tracking my biometrics. The building itself was tracking me. I scanned the office, searching for any device that might be transmitting. There was a small vented panel near the floor, a temperature sensor I'd never paid attention to. I kicked it open. Behind it was a tiny black module with a faint pulsing blue LED. The moment it blinked, the SUV driver in the camera feed tilted his head like he'd heard something. I grabbed the pry bar and smashed the device. The blue LED flickered twice and died. The red dot on the facility map vanished. The PA hissed sharply, like static with teeth in it, and the calm voice broke for the first time. Subject location lost. Initiate search pattern. Every light in the warehouse flared bright white, then plunged the entire space into pitch black. The security monitors dimmed to silhouettes. A single line of red text appeared. Backup system enabled. Opening access routes. Run. The word run didn't feel like an instruction. It felt like a plea. I yanked open the office door and sprinted into the dark warehouse. My boots slammed the concrete louder than I wanted, but stealth didn't matter anymore. Something massive shifted in the darkness behind me, too big to be a person, too fluid to be a machine. Aisle lights flickered on in sequence, illuminating a single path forward. Not a path to safety. A path deeper into the depot, towards sublevel access. The place where that morgue footage had been filmed. The place no worker was ever allowed to go. I didn't know if the system was helping me or hurting me, but I ran anyway. Because retrieval had begun. Because the future video told me how the night ends if I don't fight it. And because somewhere behind me, something with a face made of noise and wrongness had begun to follow, fast. The warehouse seemed to breathe around me as I ran. The air compressing and expanding in waves like the entire building was a lung inhaling my fear. The aisle lights strobed overhead, illuminating the path in short, violent bursts of white before plunging everything back into blackout. Every time the lights flashed, the shadow following me appeared a few feet closer, never in motion, always advancing between frames like it was skipping across reality the way a stone skips across water. Its head twitched in tiny spasms, its limbs out of sync with themselves, and its surface rippled with digital noise, as though its entire body was wrapped in corrupted video. The further I ran, the more I realized something horrifying. The building wasn't just giving me a path, it was closing every other one. Aisles sealed behind me with heavy metallic groans. Emergency doors locked with echoing clanks that reverberated through the concrete beams. The facility was funneling me somewhere. Sublevel access, the flickering directional lights seemed to say. This way, no choice. Ahead, a wide freight elevator loomed at the end of the loading bay. The doors were open, lights flickering deep inside. A warning siren pulsed from within, not loud but sharp enough to pierce straight into my skull. I was 10 feet away when the intercom snapped back to life. Subject M. Webb, stop immediately. I didn't. I lunged into the elevator just as something slammed the ground behind me, hard enough to shake the platform. A hand, if you could call it a hand, slapped against the floor outside. Long fingers stretched like wet shadows, joints bending backward before snapping forward again. I hit the control panel and smashed the closed door button until it dented. The creature's head snapped up into view. No eyes, no mouth. Just a smear of screaming static where a face should be, a glitch-made flesh, a homunculus of corrupted footage. The doors shuddered. The thing lunged. And then, clang, the elevator sealed shut, cutting it off. A distorted shriek vibrated through the steel walls and the elevator dropped. Not smoothly. Not like any elevator I'd ever been in. This one plummeted. The impact sent my teeth into my tongue, blood filling my mouth with copper. The lights flickered overhead, bathing everything in pulses of blue-white. When the elevator finally screeched to a halt, the doors opened onto a hallway that wasn't on any blueprint I'd ever been given. Sublevel D. A cold corridor tiled in white that had turned yellow with age, lit by buzzing fluorescent lights that hummed like they were whispering. The temperature dropped a full 20 degrees as I stepped out. Frost spiderwebbed across the floor tiles in patterns that looked almost biological, and lining the hallway, sealed observation windows. At first they appeared fogged over, but when I wiped my sleeve across one, the breath caught in my throat. Inside the window was a viewing room containing a stainless steel table and a body, my body, or one of me, or something that used to be me. I looked closer and felt my stomach twist. The chest cavity was open. Metal surgical clamps pulled flesh apart to expose organs arranged with precise, almost mathematical patterning. Lines of marker on the skin labeled things I didn't recognize. Config. 7B, layer offset, motion DESYNC point. The eyes were open, staring, frozen in a look of mild confusion. I stumbled backward and accidentally bumped into the next window. Another body. A different version of me, older by a few years maybe. A scar across the eyebrow I didn't have. A haircut I never wore. Same exposed chest, same surgical precision. Another label, failure, original, unstable. My vision blurred. Breath trembled. They weren't studying me. They were producing me. The PA system crackled again. The voice was closer now. Subject M. Webb, do not enter lab sector. Remain in main corridor. The building had been hurting me to prevent exactly this. I had gone off script. I walked farther, compelled and horrified. A third window showed a version of me sitting upright, eyes glassy, hooked to a breathing machine. Tubes snaked into the arms. A label on the glass read, active clone, neural sync pending. It blinked. The me inside the chamber turned its head slowly toward me, and its lips twitched like it was trying to form my name but didn't have the software installed yet. The intercom crackled and the calm voice changed, no longer confident, no longer in control. It wavered. Subject is accessing restricted material. Lockdown breach in progress. Security, contain HIM. Footsteps exploded down the hallway behind me. Heavy boots, multiple people. Real humans this time. I ran. The corridor curved, plunging into deeper shadow, and the floor began to vibrate, not from machinery but from something awake beneath it. I followed the hallway into a larger chamber that took my breath away. A rotunda of metal platforms surrounding a central cylinder of frosted glass. Lines of red code pulsed across the floor like veins. And inside the cylinder, something moved, something wearing my shape, but not exactly. Its limbs were too long, its spine too flexible, its head too still. It stood perfectly motionless in the fluid, suspended by cables that entered its skin like roots. Slowly its eyes opened, perfect replicas of mine, except empty, zero humanity, zero recognition. A label on the tank flickered, prototype 0 primary seed, the original Marcus, or none of them, or all of them. My stomach lurched. My life, when the glass exploded, it didn't shatter like normal glass. It disintegrated into a cloud of shimmering particles, each one flickering like static. The thing inside the tank fell forward through the burst of lightless fragments and hit the floor with a heavy, wet sound that reverberated through the rotunda. The soldiers shouted and opened fire, muzzle flashes strobing the chamber in bursts of gold and white. But the rounds passed through the creature as if punching through fog. The bullets clanged off the far wall or vanished into the air mid-flight, dissolving into the same digital shimmer the tank had. The creature pushed itself upright with movements that were deliberate, precise, wrong, too smooth and too slow at the same time, like someone animating a human form without fully understanding human limits. Its face was nearly my face, but cleaner, sharper, eyes too symmetrical, skin too unblemished. Perfect in a way nothing living ever is. And behind the perfection, something rippled, as if its features were layered masks trying to decide which one to settle on. Sector breach, one of the soldiers yelled. Prototype is active, we need override auth now. But the intercom didn't answer them. It was hissing, glitching, cycling through voices, mine, their commander S, the calm, automated tone, none able to stabilize. The creature lifted its head and fixed its two perfect eyes on me. I didn't feel fear in that moment. Fear is natural, instinctive. What I felt was recognition, like something I'd never known had always been waiting just under my skin and had finally stepped into the light. Behind me, one of the observation windows shattered outward. A body, another me, slumped halfway through the frame before falling to the floor with a grotesque thud. It wasn't alive. And yet its fingers twitched, grasping blindly, as if the electricity of the room itself was animating it. Then another window blew out. Another Marcus crumpled forward. Then another. Soon the entire chamber echoed with the sound of bodies collapsing. Dozens of them. All versions of me from timelines or experiments or failures I couldn't begin to understand. The soldiers panicked. One grabbed my arm and screamed, "Move. We can't let them SYNCH." I didn't know what that meant, but the urgency in his voice was enough. He shoved me toward the exit, but Prototype Zero was already between us and any kind of escape. It didn't move fast. It didn't have to. Every step it took sent ripples through the room, like reality itself bent slightly in its wake. One soldier fired again, but the bullets bent around the creature as if guided by invisible rails. Another tried to rush it with a shock baton. The creature touched the baton lightly, almost curious, and the man convulsed, collapsing as his skin flickered between his face and mine. The soldier holding my arm panicked and ran toward the elevator, abandoning me. Prototype Zero tilted its head at his fleeing shape. A fraction later, 3 other versions of him stepped out from shadowed alcoves, copies, grown or generated or hallucinated, and pulled him back into the darkness with impossible strength. His scream cut off very suddenly. I stumbled backward into the center of the rotunda, surrounded by broken tanks and dead lights and versions of myself spilling out of shattered cells. Some were older. Some were younger. Some were burned, stitched, half-complete, malformed. Some breathed. Some twitched. Some whispered, "Don't run," in voices that scrambled at the edges. Prototype Zero stepped toward me, and for a moment everything went quiet. The alarms cut off. The soldiers were gone. Even the flickering lights steadied. It stood inches from me, copying the rise and fall of my breath, syncing its posture to mine until we were mirror images with only the slightest imperfections. Those imperfections being the only reason I didn't immediately dissolve into the idea that this was me, the real me. Its mouth moved for the first time, but instead of a voice, a distorted audio burst played, a glitching reel of a dozen timelines, all of them me. "You are not stable." The sound punched through my skull like a migraine made of metal. I stumbled back, vision fracturing. Prototype Zero advanced. Behind it, the bodies on the floor began to twitch in unison, hands spasming, heads lifting, eyes opening. The entire room seemed to inhale. And then from the destroyed panel near the elevator, a soft tone chimed. My vision swam, but I turned toward it. On the cracked screen was a single line. Subject: M. Webb, true source unknown, locking identity. Prototype Zero jerked its head toward the display. Every clone in the rotunda froze. The air around us shook like a speaker blowing out. And I understood something in that moment, not logically but instinctually. They didn't know which Marcus was the original. All this time, all these experiments, all these captures and collapses and failures, they were searching, trying to trace the root, the one real consciousness, the one stable source reality. And the system had just told them. It couldn't tell the difference anymore. Prototype Zero's perfectly symmetrical face twisted, not into anger but into something worse, uncertainty. The ripples under its features destabilized. Its eyes flickered between shapes of mine, happy, afraid, dead, hollow, until it looked like a deck of faces being shuffled too fast. The clones began to collapse. One by one, their bodies folded inward like puppets cut from strings. Prototype Zero staggered back. The panels around the rotunda burst into static. The intercom returned with a single strained word: "Run." This time I listened. I bolted through the corridor as the facility convulsed behind me, lights exploding, alarms failing, the walls themselves glitching like corrupted video files. I hit the freight elevator, scrambled up the ladder inside the shaft, and pushed through a maintenance hatch into the depot's rear loading area. The outer door was open. The air outside was cold and blessedly real. I didn't stop running until the depot was a distant shape behind me, sirens wailing, power flickering, panels sparking like the building was dying. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of moving every few days, never staying anywhere long enough to be found. 6 months of watching reflections too closely, checking cameras, avoiding anything that feels like déjà vu. 6 months of wondering if I'm the real Marcus Webb or just another iteration that escaped containment. And the worst part, last night at 11:47 p.m.,